Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you. Welcome to the class for initiation, preparation for the initiation. Extremely sorry for the confusion that caused the delay. We'll start right away with the prayers. Am I audible? Guneshri Mataji, can you please confirm whether I'm audible?
Yes, you're audible. Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We'll straight away start with the prayers. Yeah. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Ena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Ena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Kadapi Swapadantikam Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Grim Yatkrupatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Paramanandam Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami iti namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschat Desha Tarine He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deen Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Shri Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Sutavat Sut Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Yeah. This is the third session on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. We'll continue from where we left last time. This will be the third session. In the first session, we learned about his childhood events and his marriage. And in the second session, we learned how he met his guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. We also learned about his initiation, about something about his businesses, and how he started the movement called League of Devotees in Jhansi. We also learned what led to his winding the League of Devotees, and also circumstances that led him to renounce his family and move away as a mendicant. So today we shall learn about his challenges he faced after he left home till he left the Indian shore for America, events that led him to get an American visa, his journey on the ship Jaladuta, reaching New York via Boston port. Is the screen visible?
Yes, Prabhuji, it is visible.
Thank you. So the next slide, this slide process shows us that in the 1950s, through very difficult years for Abhay, he returned to Jhansi, but he had to leave his building, Bharti Bhavan, where the governor's wife insisted that he use it for a ladies' club instead of the League of Devotees. So without a place to stay and with no real support, he left Jhansi. But he did not give up on his plan to start a worldwide association of devotees. So later he moved to Delhi and stayed in ashrama, living with some of his god brothers. But again, he was on his own later, a mendicant staying away from week to week in various temples or in the homes of wherever wealthy, pious people would receive him. In terms of his clothing, food, and shelter, these were the most difficult times he had ever gone through, because since in childhood he had always had proper food and good clothes, and there had been no question of where he would live. As a pet child of his father, and also having received special guidance and affection from his guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, he had no problem for his food, clothing, and shelter. But during the 90s, Abhay was alone. He spent writing the first 3 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, but in his quest to start the Krishna consciousness movement, he used to ask for help from all quarters, including the powerful leaders of that time. He used to correspond with them, hoping for some kind of help so that he can start the movement. One such letter written to the then president of the country, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, is produced here. The letter says, I have got the clue of going back to Godhead just after leaving my present material body. And in order to take along with me all contemporary men and women of the world, I have started my paper, Back to Godhead, as one of the means to the way. Please don't think of me as something wonderful or a madman when I say that I shall go back to Godhead after leaving my present material body. It is quite possible for everyone and all of us. From a letter to India's president, Mr. Rajendra Prasad. Abhay also sent copies of Back to Godhead to the then president of India, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, along with a letter warning him of the perilous fate that awaits a society conducted by the godless. Please therefore save them from the great fall down. He requested His Excellency at least to glance over the headlines of the enclosed copies of Back to Godhead and to consider granting the editor an interview. I am crying alone in wilderness at the present moment, wrote Abhay. His Excellency never replied. He never got a reply from the President of India. So Abhay then made a list of several books he wanted to publish. But to print, he needed donors. He called on wealthy men in their offices and homes, presenting his manuscripts and explaining his mission. He had a list of donors, but few responded. And when he did receive a donation, it was usually only 5 or 10 rupees. Occasionally, he would receive a letter of appreciation or endorsement. He spent his time writing and approaching donors to whom he preached Bhagavad Gita. His goal wasn't to find a permanent residence, but to print his transcendental literature and to establish a powerful movement for spreading Krishna consciousness. And for that, he needed money. Lacking money even to buy proper clothes, Abhay went through the chilly Delhi weather without a jacket. He later moved to Vrindavana, where he took a very simple, inexpensive room in the Vamshi Gopala temple, located on the bank of river Yamuna. He felt at home in Vrindavana. One night, Abhay had a striking dream, the same dream he had several times before during his days as a householder. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati appeared just as Abhay had known him, the tall, scholarly sannyasi, coming directly from the spiritual world, from Krishna's personal entourage. He called to Abhay and indicated that he should follow. Repeatedly, he called and motioned. He was asking Abhay to take sannyasa. Come, he urged, become a sannyasi. Abhay was very cautious towards accepting sannyasa because a Vaishnava dedicates his body, mind, and words totally to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, renouncing all other engagements. He was doing that already, but still he had his doubts. But here was his spiritual master beckoning him over all other considerations. Now, although he was elderly and alone, the desire to preach, just as his spiritual master had preached, remained within him. He finally decided to take sannyasa, for which he had to first approach one of his god brothers for permission. So he decided to turn to Bhakti Vilasa Tirtha Maharaj, the leader of Chaitanya Mutt in Calcutta. Abhay still thought of the Chaitanya Mutt as the headquarters of his spiritual master's mission. Bhakti Vilasa Tirtha Maharaj, though cordial, put some preconditions which were dampener for Abhay's vision of printing books and preaching in the West. Without printing books and going to the West, sannyasa did not have meaning for Abhay. And who knew when Tirtha Maharaj would sanction his taking sannyasa? So Abhay next turned to Keshav Maharaj in Mathura, and Keshav Maharaj told Abhay to take sannyasa immediately. After corresponding with Tirtha Maharaj, Abhay had felt some uncertainty about accepting sannyasa, and now he was being encouraged to strongly take sannyasa, which he resisted. But Keshav Maharaj was insistent. So Srila Prabhupada writes elsewhere, I was sitting alone in Vrindavana writing. My god brother insisted to me, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you must do it. Without accepting the renounced order of life, nobody can become a preacher. So he insisted. Not he insisted, practically my spiritual master insisted. He wanted me to become a preacher, so he forced me through this God brother to accept. So unwillingly, I accepted. So on the morning of September 17, 1959, Keshav Maharaj presided over the sannyasa ceremony. Keshav Maharaj said Abhay would be known as Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj. So this date is very significant. We may have to remember this date, September 17, 1959, they may ask this question. No one now called him as Abhay Babu any longer. Even amongst friends, it was Swamiji or Maharaja. And people often addressed him as Swami Bhaktivedanta Ji or Swami Maharaj or A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. People readily recognized him as a sadhu and offered respect. Yet his basic problems remained. He wanted to write and print, but he had no money. He wanted to broadcast the message of Godhead, but few were willing to listen. Such things hadn't been changed by his becoming a Swami. When a librarian advised Bhaktivedanta Swami to write books because they were permanent, whereas newspapers were read once and thrown away. His Back to Godhead was actually a 4-page newspaper kind of print. That is why he was advised that way. But he took this at his that his spiritual master was speaking through this person. While he was staying at Vamshi Gopal temple in Vrindavan, Gaurachand Goswami, proprietor of Radha Damodar temple, approached Bhaktivedanta Swami, inviting him to come and live at the Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan, being the eternal home of Jiva Goswami and Rupa Goswami. He felt that it would be more suitable for his writing and translating. Bhaktivedanta Swami was interested. He had never stopped his regular visits there, and he always felt inspired in the presence of the Samadhi tombs of great leaders of Lord Chaitanya's movement, Jiva Goswami and Rupa Goswami. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, however, Bhaktivedanta Swami agreed to take the rooms at 5 rupees per month. Then he decided to visit Sumati Morarji. This is one event changing meeting that he had happened, because subsequently she helps him a lot, which will lead in the subsequent slides. He decided to meet Sumati Morarji, head of the Sindhya Steamship Company. He had heard from his god brothers in Bombay that she was known for helping sadhus and had donated to the Bombay Gaudiya Mutt. He had never met her before, but he well remembered the 1958 promise by one of her officers to arrange half-fare passage for him to America. But now he wanted her to help for printing Srimad Bhagavatam. But his first attempts to arrange a meeting were unsuccessful. Frustrated and being put off by Morarji's officers, he sat down on the front steps of her office building, determined to catch her attention as she left for the day. The lone sadhu certainly caused some attention as he sat quietly chanting for 5 hours on the steps of India's Steamship Company building. Finally, late that afternoon, Mrs. Morarji emerged in a flurry of business talk with her secretary, Mr. Choksi. Upon seeing Bhaktivedanta Swami, she stopped. Who is this gentleman sitting here? She asked Mr. Choksi. He has been here for 5 hours, the secretary said. All right, I'll come, she said, and walked up to Bhaktivedanta Swami, where Bhaktivedanta Swami was sitting. He smiled and stood offering namaskaras with his folding palms. Swamiji, what can I do for you? She asked. Bhaktivedanta Swami told her briefly of his intentions to print the 3rd volume of Srimad Bhagavatam. I want your help, he said. All right, Mrs. Morarji replied, we can meet tomorrow because it is getting late. Tomorrow you can come and we will discuss. The next day, Bhaktivedanta Swami met with Mrs. Morarji in her office, where she looked at the typed manuscript and the published volumes. All right, she said, if you want to print it, I will give you the aid. Whatever you want, you can get it printed. With Mrs. Morarji's guarantee, Bhaktivedanta Swami was free to return to Vrindavana to finish writing the manuscript. Sri Prabhupada writes, I planned that I must go to America. Generally, they go to London. But I did not want to go to London. I was simply thinking how to go to New York. I was scheming whether I shall go this way through Tokyo, Japan, or that way. Which way is cheaper? That was my personal. And I was targeting to New York always. Sometimes I was dreaming that I have come to New York. Then Bhaktivedanta Swami met Mr. Agarwal, a Mathura businessman, and mentioned to him in passing, as he did to almost everyone he met, that he wanted to go to the West. Although Mr. Agarwal had known Bhaktivedanta Swami for only a few minutes, he volunteered to try to get him a sponsor in America. It was something Mr. Agarwal had done a number of times when he met a sadhu who mentioned something about going abroad to teach Hindu culture. He would ask his son Gopal, an engineer in Pennsylvania, to send him back a sponsorship form. When Mr. Agarwal volunteered to help him in this way, Bhaktivedanta Swami urged him to please do so. So he writes that I did not say anything seriously to Mr. Agarwal, but perhaps he took it very seriously. I asked him, well, why don't you ask your son Gopal to sponsor so that I can go there? I want to preach there. But Bhaktivedanta Swami knew he could not simply dream of going to the West. He needed money. So in March 1965, he made another visit to Bombay, attempting to sell his books. After selling off some of his books to a library, he returned to Delhi. And to his pleasant surprise, he was contacted by the Ministry of External Affairs and informed that his no objection certificate for going to the US was ready. Since he had not himself instigated any proceedings for leaving the country, Bhaktivedanta Swami had to inquire from the ministry about what had happened, how he got this NOC, because he had not himself initiated it. They showed him the statutory declaration form signed by Mr. Gopal Agarwal of Butler, Pennsylvania. Mr. Agarwal has solemnly declared that he would bear the expenses of Bhaktivedanta Swami during his stay in the US. So Prabhupada writes that whatever the correspondence was there between the father and son, I do not know. I simply asked him, why don't you ask your son Gopal to sponsor? And now after 3 or 4 months, the no objection certificates was sent from the Indian consulate in New York to me. He had already sponsored my arrival there for 1 month, and all of a sudden I got the paper. He had to arrange for the passport. The passport was not very difficult to obtain, and by June 10, he had his passport. With his passport and sponsorship papers, Bhaktivedanta Swami went to Bombay, this time not to sell books or raise funds for printing, but he wanted a ticket for America. So he again tried approaching Sumati Morarji of the India Shipping. He showed her his sponsorship papers to his secretary, Mr. Choksi, who was impressed and who went to Mrs. Morarji on his behalf. The Swamiji from Vrindavan is back. He wants to go to America. He wants you to send him on a Scindia ship. Mrs. Morarji said no. The Swamiji was too old to go to United States and expect to accomplish anything. As Mr. Choksi conveyed to him Mrs. Choksi's and Mr. Morarji's words, Bhaktivedanta Swami listened disapprovingly. She wanted him to stay in India and complete the Srimad Bhagavatam. Why go to the States? Finish the job here. But Bhaktivedanta Swami was fixed on going. He told Mr. Choksi that he should convince Mrs. Morarji. He coached Mr. Choksi on what he should say. I find this gentleman very inspired to go to the States and preach something to the people there. But when told Mrs. Morarji, she again said no. The Swami was not healthy. It would be too cold there. He might not be able to come back. And she doubted whether he would be able to accomplish much there. People in America were not so cooperative and they would probably not listen to him. Exasperated with Mr. Choksi's ineffectiveness, Bhaktivedanta Swami demanded a personal interview. It was granted, and a grey-haired, determined Bhaktivedanta Swami presented his emphatic request, please give me one ticket. Srimati Morarji was concerned. Swamiji, you are old. You are taking this responsibility. Do you think it is all right? No, he reassured her, lifting his hand as if to reassure a doubting daughter. It is all right. But do you know what my secretaries think? They say Swamiji is going to die there. Bhaktivedanta made a face as if to dismiss a foolish rumor. Again, he insisted that she give him a ticket. All right, she said, get your P form and I will make an arrangement to send you by our ship. A P form, another necessity for an Indian national who wants to leave the country, is a certificate given by the state of India certifying that the person has no excessive debt in India and is cleared by the banks. That this P form would take a while to obtain, and while he did not yet have a visa, US visa, he needed to pursue these government permissions in Bombay, but he had no place to stay. So Mrs. Morarji agreed to let him reside at Scindia Colony, a compound of apartments for employees of the Scindia Company. He stayed in a small, unfurnished apartment with only his trunk and typewriter. Every day he would go out trying to get his visa and P form as quickly as possible, selling his books and seeking contacts and support for his future Srimad Bhagavatam publishing. His backing by Srindia and his sponsorship in the US were a strong presentation, and with the help of the people at Scindia, he obtained his visa on July 28, 1965. But the P form proceedings went slowly and even threatened to be a last insurmountable obstacle. He had to personally meet the seniors in the office to process his P form, which was finally cleared. Following Mrs. Morarji's instructions, her secretary, Mr. Choksi, made final arrangements for Bhaktivedanta Swami. Since he had no warm clothes, Mr. Choksi took him to buy a wool jacket and other woolen clothes. So Mr. Choksi spent about 250 rupees on his new clothes, including some new dhotis. At Bhakti Vedanta Swami's request, Mr. Choksi printed 500 copies of the small pamphlet containing the 8 verses written by Lord Chaitanya and an advertisement for Srimad Bhagavatam in the context of an advertisement for the Scindia Steamship Company. Finally, Mrs. Morarji scheduled a place for him in one of her ships, the Jaladuta, which was sailing from Calcutta on August 13. She had made certain that he would travel on a ship whose captain understood the needs of a vegetarian and a brahmana. Mrs. Morarji told the Jaladuta captain, Arun Pandya, to carry extra vegetables and fruits for the Swami. Mr. Choksi spent the last 2 days with Bhaktivedanta Swami in Bombay, picking up the pamphlets at the press, purchasing clothes, and driving him to the station to catch the train for Calcutta. He arrived in Calcutta about 2 weeks before the Jaladuta's departure. Although he had lived much of his life in the city, he now had nowhere to stay. It was as if he had written in his Vrindavana Bhajana, I have my wife, sons, daughters, grandsons, everything, but I have no money. So they are a fruitless glory. Although in the city he had been so carefully nurtured as a child, those early days were also gone forever. Where have my loving father and mother gone to now? And where are all my elders, who were my own folk? Who will give me news of them? Tell me who. All that is left of this family life is a list of names. Out of hundreds of people in Calcutta whom Bhaktivedanta Swami knew, he chose to call Mr. Sisir Bhattacharya, the flamboyant Kirtana singer he had met a year before at the governor's house in Lucknow. Mr. Bhattacharya was not a relative, not a disciple, not even a close friend, but he was willing to help. Bhaktivedanta Swami called at his place and informed him that he would be leaving on a cargo ship in a few days. He needed a place to stay, and he would like to give some lectures. Mr. Bhattacharya immediately began to arrange a few private meetings at friends' homes where he would sing and Bhaktivedanta Swami would then speak. He also, a week before his departure on August 6th, Bhaktivedanta Swami traveled to nearby Mayapur to pay a visit to the Samadhi of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. And after that, he returned to Calcutta, where Mr. Bhattacharya continued to assist him with the final business and speaking engagements. As the day of his departure approached, Bhaktivedanta Swami took stock of his meager possessions. He had only a suitcase, an umbrella, and a supply of dry cereal. He did not know what he would find to eat in America. Perhaps there would only be meat. He thought so. If so, he was prepared to live on boiled potatoes and the cereal. His main baggage, several trunk of his books, was being handled separately by Scindia Cargo at Bombay. 200 3-volume sets. The very thought of books gave him confidence. When the day came for him to leave, he needed that confidence. He was making a momentous break with his previous life, and he was dangerously old and not in good health. and he was going to an unknown and probably unwelcoming country. To be poor and unknown in India was one thing. Even in these Kali Yuga days, when India leaders were rejecting Vedic culture and imitating the West, it was still India. It was still the remains of Vedic civilization. He had been able to see millionaires, governors, the prime minister, simply by showing up at their doors and waiting. The sannyasi was respected. The Srimad Bhagavatam was respected. But in America, it would be different. He would be no one, just a foreigner. And there was no tradition of sadhus, no temples, no free ashramas. But when he thought of the books he was bringing, transcendental knowledge in English, he became confident. Bhaktivedanta Swami took a taxi down to Kolkata port on the day of his journey. A few friends and admirers, along with his son Vrindavan, accompanied him. He writes in his diary, today at 9 a.m., embarked on the motor vessel Jaladuta. Came with me Bhagavati Varwan of Sindhya Sanshir, Mr. Sen Gupta, Mr. Ali, and Vrindavan. He was carrying a Bengali copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita, which he intended to read during the crossing. Somehow he would be able to cook on board, or if not, he could starve, whatever Krishna desired. He checked his essentials, passenger ticket, passport, visa, T-form, sponsor's address. Finally, it was happening. Srila Prabhupada, he writes that with what great difficulty I got out of the country. Some way or other, by Krishna's grace, I got out so I could spread the Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. Otherwise, to remain in India, it was not possible. I wanted to start a movement in India, but I was not at all encouraged. Today, the ship is flying very smoothly, he writes further. I feel today is better, but I'm feeling separation from Sri Vrindavan and my lords, Sri Govinda, Gopinath, Radha Damodar. My only solace is Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, in which I am tasting the nectarian of Lord Chaitanya's Leela. I have left Bharat Bhumi just to execute the orders of Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in pursuance of Lord Chaitanya's order. I have no qualification, but have taken up the risk just to carry out the orders of His divine grace. I depend fully on their mercy so far away from Vrindavan. This is written in his Jaladuta diary, September 10, 1965. The Jaladuta was a regular cargo carrier of the Sindhya Steamship Navigation Company, but there was a very important passenger on board that day. During the voyage from Calcutta to New York in August and September of 1965, the cabin was occupied by Sri Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami, whose age was listed as 69, and who was taken on board bearing a complimentary ticket with food. The Jaladuta ship under the command of Captain Arun Pandya, whose wife was also aboard, left at 9 a.m. on Friday, August 13. In his diary, Srila Prabhupada noted the cabin was quite comfortable, thanks to Lord Sri Krishna for enlightening Sumati Morarji for all these arrangements. I feel I am quite comfortable, but on the 14th, he reported the next day, the 13th they started, on the 14th, he reported seasickness, dizziness, vomiting, the Bay of Bengal, heavy rains, more sickness. On the 19th of August, when the ship arrived at Colombo, Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, Prabhupada was able to get relief from his seasickness. The captain Pandya took him ashore and he traveled around Colombo by car. Then the ship went on towards Cochin on the west coast of India. Janmashtami, the appearance day of Lord Krishna, fell on the 20th of August that day. Prabhupada took the opportunity to speak to the crew about the glories of and philosophy of Lord Krishna, and he distributed prasadam, which he had cooked himself. August 21st, the next day, was his 69th birthday, which he observed at sea without any ceremony. He didn't inform anybody, so it was not observed. By the 23rd of August, the ship had put out to Red Sea, where Srila Prabhupada encountered great difficulty. He noted in his diary, rain, seasickness, dizziness, headache, no appetite, vomiting. The symptoms persisted, but it was more than seasickness. The pains in his chest made him think he would die at any moment. In 2 days, he suffered 2 heart attacks. He tolerated the difficulty, meditating on the purpose of his mission. But after 2 days of such violent attacks, he thought that if another were to come, he would certainly not survive. On the night of the second day, Prabhupada had a dream. Lord Krishna, in his many forms, was rowing a boat, and he told Prabhupada that he should not fear, but should come along. Prabhupada felt assured of Lord Krishna's protection, and the violent attacks did not reoccur. The Jaladuta entered the Suez Canal on September 1 and stopped in Port Said on the 2nd. Srila Prabhupada visited the city with the captain and said he liked it. By the 6th of September, he had recovered a little from his illness and was eating regularly again for the first time in 2 weeks. He reported this in his diary that his strength renewed little by little. On the 9th September, he writes that today afternoon we have crossed over the Atlantic Ocean for 24 hours. The whole day was clear and almost smooth. I am taking my food regularly and have got some strength to struggle. There is also a slight tacking of the ship, and I am feeling a slight headache. But I am struggling, and the nectarian of life is Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, the source of all my vitality. The ocean voyage of 1965 was a calm one for Jaladuta. The captain said that never in his entire career had he seen such calm Atlantic crossing. Prabhupada replied that the calmness was Lord Krishna's mercy, and Mrs. Pandya asked Prabhupada to come back with them so that they might have another such crossing. Srila Prabhupada wrote in his diary, if the Atlantic would have shown its usual face, perhaps I would have died. But Lord Krishna had taken charge of the ship. After a 35-day journey from Kolkata, the Jaladuta finally reached Boston's Commonwealth Pier at 5:30 a.m. on September 17, 1965. The ship was to stop briefly in Boston before proceeding to New York City, the final destination of Srila Prabhupada. Among the first things Srila Prabhupada saw in America were the gray front waterfront dawn revealed the ships in the harbor. Prabhupada had to pass through US Immigration and Customs in Boston. His visa allowed him a 3-month stay and an Indian official stamp it to indicate his expected date and departure. Captain Pandya invited Prabhupada to take a walk into Boston, where the captain intended to do some shopping. They walked across a footbridge into a busy commercial area with old churches, warehouses, office buildings, bars, lottery bookshops, nightclubs, and restaurants. Here is where Prabhupada penned a Bengali poem titled Markine Bhagavate Dharma, translated as Teachings of Krishna Consciousness in America. So some of the verses that he wrote is written below. In this, he writes that, my dear Lord Krishna, you are so kind upon this useless soul, but I do not know why you have brought me here. Now you can do whatever you like with me. But I guess you have some business here. Otherwise, why would you bring me to this terrible place? Oh Lord, I am just like a puppet in your hands. So if you have brought me here to dance, then make me dance. Make me dance. Oh Lord, make me dance as you like. I have no devotion, nor do I have any knowledge, but I have strong faith in the holy name of Krishna. I have been designated as Bhakti Vedanta, and now, if you like, you can fulfill the real purport of Bhakti Vedanta. He wrote this on board the Jaladuta at Boston. On the 19th of September, the Jaladuta sailed into New York Harbor and docked at the Brooklyn Pier. Like everybody else, other millions of visitors, he went and he could see the Statue of Liberty and he could see the Empire State Buildings. Sri Prabhupada was dressed appropriately for a resident of Vrindavana. He wore Kantimala, the neck beads, and a simple cotton dhoti. He carried Japamala, the chanting beads, and an old chadar or shawl. His complexion was golden, his head shaven, shika in the back, his forehead decorated with the whitish Vaishnava tilaka. He wore pointed white rubber slippers, not uncommon for sadhus in India. But who in New York had ever seen or dreamt of anyone appearing like this Vaishnava? He was possibly the first Vaishnava sannyasi to arrive in New York with uncompromised appearance. Of course, New Yorkers have an expertise in not giving much attention to any kind of strange new arrival. Sri Prabhupada was on his own. He had a sponsor, Mr. Agarwal, somewhere in Pennsylvania. Surely someone would be here to greet him, although he had little idea of what to do as he walked off the ship onto the pier. I did not know where to turn, left or right. He passed through the dockside formalities and was met by a representative from the Travelers' Aid sent by the Agarwals in Pennsylvania, who offered to take him to the Scindia ticket office in Manhattan to book his return passage to India. He took a bus from New York to Butler in Pennsylvania to stay at his sponsor Gopal Agarwal's house. When the bus finally pulled into Pittsburgh bus terminal, it was past midnight. Gopal Agarwal was waiting with the family's Volkswagen bus to drive Prabhupada to Butler, which is about 1 hour north. He greeted Prabhupada with folded hands, welcome Swamiji, bowing from the waist several times. On the way to Pennsylvania, he observed mammoth factories and billboards alongside the crowded highway. Meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication, and gambling, the very sins Srila Prabhupada had come to preach against, were proudly glamorized on mile after mile of billboards. The signs promoted liquor and cigarettes, roadside restaurants offered slaughtered cows in the form of steaks and hamburgers. And no matter what the product, it was usually advertised by a woman. He saw that the prospects for preaching to the Americans was good, but he felt he would need support from India. He stayed with Agarwal's family for about a month. The Agarwals, in the first few days, accommodated him in his house and asked him to sleep on the couch, but they were very comfortable because he was wearing saffron, and they were concerned of what would their friends ask him about Swami who was staying in the house. So they put him in a YMCA hotel where he would stay at the night, and during the day he would come and preach at the Agarwal's house from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. every day. So after spending 1 month in Butler, he had to spend. He felt he spent long enough in Butler, and now he had 1 more month to left in America. So he decided to go to New York City and try to preach there before his time was up. So he writes that I have come here in this old age neither for sightseeing nor for any personal interest. It is for the interest of the entire humanity that I am trying to implement the science of Krishna, which will actually make them happy. So it is the duty of every devotee of Lord Krishna to help me by all means. This is an extract from a letter to Mrs. Sumati Maharaji. November and December passed, and Prabhupada, having obtained an extension on his visa, stayed on. America seems so opulent, yet many things were difficult to tolerate. The sirens and bells from fire engines and police cars seems like they would crack his heart. Sometimes at night, he would hear a person being attacked and crying for help. Srila Prabhupada wore a coat Dr. Mishra gave him, but he never gave up wearing his dhoti. Dr. Mishra was a person at whose house he stayed when he came back from Butler to New York. After some days, he could not stay at Butler at New York's Mishra's house because he found his ideology very different from Dr. Mishra, who was a Mayavadi follower, and he didn't have any faith in whatever Prabhupada said. So he was wearing Prabhupada was wearing a coat that Dr. Mishra had given him, but he never gave up on wearing his dhoti despite the severe cold and windy walks. Swami Nikhilananda of the Ramakrishna Mutt, Samasya Mishra, had advised Prabhupada that if he wanted to stay in the West, he should abandon his traditional Indian dress and strict vegetarianism. Meat eating and liquor, as well as pants and coat, were almost a necessity in this climate, he had said. Prabhupada never considered taking on Western ways. His advisors cautioned him not to remain an alien, but to get into the spirit of American life, even if it meant breaking vows he had held in India. Almost all Indian immigrants compromised their old ways. But Prabhupada's idea was different. He would not budge. The others would have to compromise, he thought. But they had come to beg technological knowledge from the West. I have not come to beg something, he said, but to give something. Prabhupada received a letter from Sri Padampad Singhania, the director of the very large JK organization in India. Prabhupada returned Sri Padampad for financial support, and his reply gave him hope. Not only was the Singhania family fabulously wealthy, but his family were devotees of Lord Krishna. Mr. Singhania wrote, "My dear Swamiji, I have gone through your letter. I am very glad to note your idea of erecting Sri Radhakrishna Temple in New York. I think the proposal is a good one, but the following are the difficulties. He listed two difficulties. The first is we have got to send foreign exchange for building the temple, for which government sanction is required. Without the government sanction, no money can be sent abroad. If the government of India agrees, then one can think of erecting a temple in New York. The second point is I doubt whether with this small amount of rupees 7 lakhs, a temple can be built in New York. I mean to carry out a nice construction with Indian type of architecture. To get a temple completed in Indian type of architecture, we have to send a man from India. These are the two main difficulties. Otherwise, your idea is very good. That's what Mr. Singhania wrote to him. Srila Prabhupada and Mr. Singhania had one basic disagreement. A magnificent Indian temple in New York would cost many millions of dollars to construct. Prabhupada knew, of course, that if Padampat Singhania wanted, he could provide millions of dollars. But then how would they get so much money out of India? Prabhupada therefore again suggested that they spend only 7 lakhs. After purchasing the house, he wrote, we can build another story upon it with a temple dome, chakra, etc. Prabhupada had his own line of reasoning. He wrote to Tirtha Maharaj, his godbrother, who had agreed to try for the government sanction if he first received written confirmation from a responsible donor pledging the funds for the temple. Prabhupada informed him that the donor would be Sri Padampat Singhania, and he enclosed Mr. Singhania's favorable letter. Mr. Prabhupada reminded his godbrother that Srila Prabhupada Bhakti Siddhanta wanted such temples in foreign cities like New York, London, Tokyo, etc. And I had personal talks with him when I first met him at Ulta Danga in 1922. Now here is a chance for me to carry out his transcendental order. I'm just seeking your favor and mercy in making this attempt successful. Discouragement came to the plans Srila Prabhupada had formed around the promise of support by Padampat Singhania. He wrote to express his dissatisfaction with the location that was identified by Prabhupada in New York. He wrote, Mr. Singhania wrote, I'm afraid that I cannot agree with your suggestion that you should buy a small house and erect something on top of it. Unfortunately, such a kind of proposal will not suit me. I quite agree that you cannot spend a lot of money at present, but with the amount the government may sanction, you should build something according to the architecture of Indian temples. Then only we will be able to create some impression on the American people. This is all I can write to you in this connection. I'm very grateful for your taking the trouble of writing me. Prabhupada did not take this letter as final. He maintained hope that Sri Padampat Singhania would still give money for the temple if only the transfer of money could be arranged. He continued writing his godbrothers and other devotees, asking them to secure his government sanction. He maintained his same aspirations, even though his sole prospective donor had rejected his scheme of a chakra and dome atop the conventional two-story building. Prabhupada wrote to the proprietors of the Universal Book House of Bombay, giving some hints for selling the Srimad Bhagavatam in Bombay area to collect funds. He explained that he was trying to establish a Radha Krishna temple and that big industrialists of India had promised to pay for the cost. Since it seemed that he might stay in the United States for many more days, he wanted the book house to take increased charge of selling his books through India. They were his agent for selling his books in Maharashtra, but now he recommended that they take the responsibility in all provinces and introduce his books in colleges and universities throughout India. He also requested that they credit his bank account there for the books sold so far. However, he was disappointed because Mr. A.P. Dhadwarkar of the Universal Book House replied, I cannot give you very happy news on the progress of the sale of Srimad Bhagavatam because the subject is religious and only a small section of society may personally be interested in the books. We tried to push them through some booksellers in Nagpur, Ahmedabad, Pune, etc. But regret to inform that after some time, these booksellers returned the book for want of response. As such, we are not only unenthusiastic to agree to a proposal of taking up sales for all of India, but we are just thinking of requesting you to nominate some other people in our place to represent your sale program in Maharashtra. So far, they have sold only 6 sets of books for which they have able to transfer 172 to his account. This was hardly encouraging to the author, Srila Prabhupada. Again, India was not interested, he thought. Even in the land of religion, religious subjects were only for a small section of society. So some of the reverses that he faced is listed in this slide. So another reverse on February 8, 1966, Srila Prabhupada had returned to India's new Prime Minister, then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, requesting her to sanction the release of money from India. He got a reply dated February 26. New Delhi came from the Prime Minister's official secretary, Mr. L.K. Jha. The Prime Minister has seen a letter of February. Dear Swamiji, the Prime Minister written your letter February 18, 1966. She appreciates the spirit which prompted you to carry the spiritual message of Srimad Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam to other countries. Owing to the critical foreign exchange situation which the country is facing, it is greatly regretted that it will not be possible to assist you from here on your plan to set up a Radha Krishna temple in America. But Prabhupada had other hopes. After writing to the Prime Minister, he had written again to Tirtha Maharaj asking him to request Dr. Radhakrishnan, the President, to persuade the government to sanction the release of funds. He waited for 1 month, but there was no answer. Apparently, God brothers felt little obligation towards preaching in America. He had written that he needed encouragement from them to continue in America because it was so expensive. He had explained that he was spending the equivalent of 1,000 rupees a month. As such, I am counting every day to receive your favorable replies. But there was no reply. Although no one encouraged him, Prabhupada trusted in the order of his spiritual master and the will of Krishna. The word from the Prime Minister regarding government sanction had been a definite no, but he had received another extension of his visa. Now his last hope was Sri Sir Padampat Singhania. Prabhupada knew that he was so influential a man in India that if he wanted, he could send the money. He was Prabhupada's final hope. So he again wrote to Sir Padampat Singhania requesting him to send a man from India to supervise the work on the temple in New York, as Mr. Singhania had previously suggested. Mr. Singhania did not reply personally. He had his secretary, Mr. Ishwara Iyer, write to Prabhupada, thoroughly discouraging his last hopes for purchasing a building in New York. I regret to write that Sri Padampatji is not interested in the scheme of building a Radha Krishna temple in New York at present. In regard to the inquiry contained in the last paragraph of a letter, Sir Padampatji duly received your books of Srimad Bhagavatam from your Delhi office. Yours faithfully. Then Prabhupada wrote again to Sumati Morarji, requesting her to please send him a mridanga to accompany his chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. He also requested her that in future, when he would send many men from India, she obliged by giving them free passage on Scindia steamship lines. He received no reply. As his financial situation became more urgent and his hopes more strained, his support from India withdrew its silence. His answered correspondence was itself a kind of message loud and clear which said, "We cannot help you." In April of 1966, Prabhupada received a ludicrous letter. He also received the final blow of non-cooperation from the Indian government. Second Secretary Prakash Shah of the Indian Embassy in Washington, D.C. wrote, Due to the existing conditions of foreign exchange stringency, it is not possible for the government of India to accede to a request for release of foreign exchange. You may perhaps like to raise funds from residents in America. It was confirmed Prabhupada would have to work without outside help. He would continue alone in New York City. His last letter to his correspondence in India bore no result. So the controversy is now closed and there is no need of help from anyone else in India. Just give me a moment. So in April 1966, Prabhupada received, next. So he wanted to provide Radha and Krishna temple in New York, but his success was that he was remembering Krishna even in New York in the winter of 1965-66, whether the world recognized him or not. Not a day passed when he did not work on Krishna's book, Srimad Bhagavatam, and not a day went by when he did not offer food to Krishna and speak on Krishna's philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. Here I'm now writing, sitting in New York, the world's greatest city, such a magnificent city, but my heart is always hankering after that Vrindavana. I shall be very happy to return to my Vrindavana, that sacred place. But then why are you here? Now, because it's my duty, I have brought some message for you people, because I have been ordered by my superior, my spiritual master. Whatever you have learned, you should go to the Western countries and you must distribute this knowledge. So in spite of all my difficulties, all my conveniences, I am here because I am obligated by the duty. This is from a lecture by Sri Prabhupada. When he was staying in New York, which was called the room 307 in the book, in 1966 April, someone broke into his room. Somebody carried out theft in his room and stole all his typewriter and his tape recorder. When Prabhupada returned to the building, the janitor informed him of the theft. Prabhupada had lost his spirit for living in room number 307. He thought that what would prevent the thief from stealing again. So he contacted two of his associates there, Harvey Cohen and Bill Epstein, who had advised him to locate downtown and assured him of a more interested following among the young people there. It had been an attractive proposal for Prabhupada and he began to reconsider it. Then Harvey offered Prabhupada his studio in the Bowery. Just for information, a Bowery is a street and an area in New York City historically noted for its cheap hotels and saloons and populated by people who were destitute and homeless. Mostly the drug addicts lived there. Harvey offered his loft for Prabhupada to share with David Allen at the Bowery. David was a young 21-year-old man, 6 feet tall and addicted to drugs. Although Prabhupada and David each had a designated living area in the large loft, the entire place soon became dominated by Prabhupada's preaching activity. Prabhupada and David stayed together, and at first Prabhupada considered David an aspiring disciple. Of all his friends and admirers, Prabhupada gave his roommate David Allen the most personal attention and training. He felt he was giving David a special chance to become America's first genuine Vaishnava. Prabhupada would eventually return to India and he wanted to take David to Vrindavana. He would show him temple worship and train him for future preaching in the West. He had requested Sumati Morarji to provide free passage for David as well as for himself. At first, David and Swamiji lived together peacefully in the large hall, and Swamiji working concentratedly on his side of the partition. David, however, continued taking marijuana, LSD, and amphetamines. It's like a drug. And Prabhupada had no choice but to tolerate it. Several times he told David that drugs and hallucinations would not help his spiritual life, but David would look distracted. He was becoming estranged from the Swami. But Prabhupada had a plan to use the loft as a temple, to transform it into New York's first temple of Radha Krishna, and he wanted David's cooperation. Although the neighborhood was one of the most miserable in the world, Prabhupada talked of bringing deities from Jaipur and Vrindavan and starting temple worship even on the Bowery. He thought David might help. After all, they were roommates, so there could be no question of David not cooperating. But he would have to give up his bad habits. Prabhupada was trying to help David, but David was too disturbed. He was headed for disaster. And so were Prabhupada's plans for the loft. Sometimes not even under the influence of a drug, he would pace around the loft. Other times he appeared to be deep in thought. One day, on a dose of LSD, he went completely crazy. That's David. Swamiji was working peacefully on his typewriter when David freaked out. David started moaning and pacing around the large open area of the loft. Then he began yelling, howling, and running all around. He went back to where the Swamiji was. Suddenly, Prabhupada found himself face to face, not with David, nice David, whom he was going to take to India to show the Brahmanas in Vrindavana, but a drugged, wild-eyed stranger, a madman. Prabhupada tried to speak to him. What is the matter? But David had nothing to say. There was no particular disagreements, just madness. Prabhupada moved quickly down the 4 flights of stairs. He had not stopped to gather up any of his belongings or even to decide where he would go or whether he would return. There had been no time to consider anything. He had taken quite a shock, and now he was leaving the arena of David's madness. Where was he going? He didn't know. He had come onto the street without knowing where he would go. He wasn't going back to the loft, that was for sure. But where would he go? Before nightfall, he would have to find some place to stay. There are just about 4 slides, we'll complete that, okay? He decided to phone Carl and ask him for help. Hearing the Swami's voice on the phone, it was an emergency. Carl at once agreed that Prabhupada could move in with him and his wife Eva. Their place was close by on Center Street, 5 blocks west of Brovary, near Chinatown, Carl, and would be right over. Prabhupada had left his belongings at David's loft and didn't want to go back. So Carl went over to pick up a few essential items. Prabhupada asked him to leave most of his things, including his books, suitcases, and reel-to-reel tape recorder, where they were. Prabhupada began staying with Carl and his wife. Yet for Carl and Eva, Prabhupada's simple presence created difficulty. Almost at once, the situation became intolerable for Eva. She resented the Swami's presence in her home. Prabhupada was not insensitive to the distress his presence was causing Carl and Eva. He approached Mike, who had a knack of getting things done. They scanned through newspaper advertisements and narrowed down to a storefront for $125 per month rent. Then Mr. Gardiner, the owner, revealed a small second-floor apartment just across the rear courtyard, directly behind the storefront. Another $75 a month, and Swami could live there. So he agreed to take that on rent, and it was time for Prabhupada to shift to his new residence. He, along with others, went to the Bowery to fetch all his belongings. His new address was at 22nd Second Avenue, and his new address was a gift shop named Matchless Gifts, which moved out. So he was given the place to stay. What surprised Srila Prabhupada was that the prosperous land of America would breed so many discontented youths. It also proved that material well-being is hallmark of American life that could not make people happy. Only cure, he thought, was Krishna consciousness. But by his Guru and Krishna's will, Prabhupada had come to the lower east side of America. He was fixed in order of his Guru. Once when he was walking on the street, Prabhupada met Howard, who was an English teacher at Ohio University. Howard was fresh from his recent trip to India. They both connected with each other as Howard was interested in Hindu philosophy and the country. Howard told his roommates Keith and Wally about Swamiji. Swamiji was going to start class at 2nd Avenue storefront. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Prabhupada held Bhagavad Gita class from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., where Howard and his roommates attended along with others. Prabhupada started chanting kirtans and encouraged the audience to play the cymbals in proper beat. They could repeat the Hare Krishna kirtans. There was good response to his classes. Prabhupada started chanting. Everyone was referring to the storefront as temple because of Swamiji's presence and words he spoke and kirtans. Howard, Keith, and Wally decorated the hall with curtains, posters, paintings, large decorative silk hangings, incense burners, etc. They constructed wooden platform for Swamiji for Prabhupada to sit on and covered it with golden velvet cloth. They hanged original paintings of Sri Radha Krishna on circular canvas made by one James Jerin. It was a surprise for Swamiji. Other walls had pictures of Lord Hanuman carrying mountain for Lord Rama. We shall call our society ISKCON. That's what Srila Prabhupada playfully said when he first coined the acronym. He had initiated the legal work of incorporation that spring while still living in Bowery. But even before its legal beginning, he had been talking about his International Society for Krishna Consciousness. A friend of his suggested a title that would sound more familiar to Westerners, International Society for God Consciousness. But Prabhupada had insisted Krishna Consciousness. God was a vague term, he thought, whereas Krishna was exact and scientific. God consciousness was spiritually weaker. less personal. And if Westerners didn't know that Krishna was God, then the International Society for Krishna Consciousness would tell them by spreading his glories in every town and village. But to register ISKCON legally as a non-profit tax-exempt religion required money and lawyer. Karl had already gained some experience in forming religious, political, and social welfare groups. And when he had met Prabhupada on the Bowery, he had agreed to help. He had contacted his lawyer, Stephen Goldsmith. Stephen Goldsmith, a young Jewish lawyer, and his wife and 2 children, and an office on Park Avenue, was interested in spiritual movements. When Karl told him about Prabhupada's plan, he was immediately fascinated by the idea of setting up a religious corporation for the Indian Swami. He visited Prabhupada at 26 2nd Avenue and they discussed incorporation, tax exemption, Prabhupada's immigration status, and Krishna consciousness. Mr. Goldsmith visited Prabhupada several times. Once he brought his children who liked the soup the Swami cooked as prasadam. He began attending the evening lectures where he was often the only non-hippie member of the congregation. One evening, having completed all the legal groundwork and being ready to complete the procedures for incorporation, Mr. Goldsmith came to Prabhupada's lecture and Kirtana to get signatures from the trustees of the new society. This is how ISKCON took shape. The last slide. The 7th purpose of setting up of International Society of Krishna Consciousness. The first one, to systematically propagate Krishna's spiritual knowledge to society at large and to educate all people in the techniques of spiritual life in order to check the imbalance of values in life and to achieve real unity and peace in the world. The second is to propagate a consciousness of Krishna as it is revealed in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Third is to bring out the members of the society together with each other and nearer to Krishna, the prime entity, thus to develop the idea within the members, the humanity at large, that each soul is part and parcel of the quality of Godhead, that is Krishna. To teach and encourage the Sankirtana movement, congregation chanting of the holy name of God as revealed in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The fifth is to erect for the members and for society at large the holy place of transcendental pastimes dedicated to the personality of Krishna. Sixth is to bring the members closer to together for the purpose of teaching a simpler and more natural way of life. The seventh and the last one is with a view towards achieving the aforementioned purposes to publish and distribute periodicals, magazines, books, and other writings. With this, we finish the third session of Prabhupada Lilamrita. We'll try to conclude this book in the next class. So, if anybody has got anything to ask or anything, we can take it. Otherwise, we can close it. Please unmute yourself when you can speak. Then I think we can close the class. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
We close the class. Vancha kalpaturbrashta kripa sindhu cha eva cha patidanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo Koti Vaishnavrinda ke jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna,
Thank you,
Prabhuji.
Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.